Okay, do you have any questions about what you just did? Most of you look like you were fairly busy despite the warmth in the afternoon, and now it's cooled off a little bit, so I hope you're woken up a little bit just in time to end. Any questions? Well, that's sure easy.
Well, would you talk some more about the distinction between a new quality and an ambiguous quality in terms of counterexamples and the I am and I am not this? We kind of ran into that.
Okay.
And just to clarify it even more.
Okay. Well, if you don't, the real big opportunity for building a new quality period is when you don't have anything inside. It's like, these are like nets. They catch experiences. And they accumulate experiences. So if you have, if you have a positive quality, I'm an honest person or something like that, you have some kind of positive database, maybe with a few times when you told some little white lies or you didn't quite report all your money to the IRS or something like that. This structure acts as a sort of a net that catches new experiences. So every time you're honest again, you kind of notice and you can put that into your database. If you're dishonest, you notice that and you have to do something, well, gosh, what am I going to do next time? To bring some coherence between your self-concept and your behavior. And usually in something positive like this, it's very important that it prevails and modifies your behavior. So you go, oh boy, next time I want to do something different. I'm dissatisfied with that. And we talked, early this morning about how a few counterexamples like this, the contrast with the positives really highlights the importance of the positives for you. I mean, there are many, many things going on there. There's one thing, if you feel really bad about one of these negatives, oh man, I really feel bad about that. That bad feeling is a measure of the strength of your commitment to the positive. So you can feel good about feeling bad. And it's not a game. I mean, it is a game, but it's not. It's real. It makes a difference if you go, oh, man, I really screwed up, and you feel bad about that. If you think about it in a larger scope, you can think, man, I'm sure glad I feel that bad about it, because that means it's really important. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't feel bad about it. You don't care. So you can play these little games, and sometimes they work great, like that one, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes people can feel bad about feeling good. I'm having too much pleasure. If you have puritanical ideas or something like that, then you can feel bad about feeling good. That one's usually not so good. You can feel bad about feeling bad, which compounds your misery. But you can feel good about feeling good. You can enjoy it twice. Or you can feel good about feeling bad. That puts it into a more positive spin. This all has to do with levels of logical levels and so on, and playing that kind of game. Now, if you don't have anything in there, then there's nothing to catch experience. There's nothing to catch it and hold on to it. If this guy that I have got on the video, and the video must be here if you want to find a time to see it sometime. Didn't find it. Really? Well, boo hiss. You should talk to the management and complain. Anyway, when people said something nice to him, he had this wonderful gesture. It's like this. And people often have these dismissive gestures. You say, gosh, you did that really well, and they go like that. That indicates that it's just going right past them. Now, it could go right past them because they have a negative thing in here. Oh, I'm not that kind of person. That's not true of me at all. Or often it goes past them because they just got nothing in there. Nothing to hold on to it. And that's when building quality from scratch is the most effective, when there's just nothing in there to start with. So there's no negatives in there that you have to mess around with and transform into positives. If you had a bunch of positives already, then you already know that about yourself, so then it's not appropriate. But when there's nothing at all in there, and it's just like, I don't know what you're talking about, that's when you can just build. You just fill in a template the way you've been doing. Now, to go on a little farther, I want to sort of give a little forecast here. This is what we started with yesterday morning. Positive and there's a few negatives. Maybe the counterexamples are separate, but for convenience, I'm just diagramming them integrated here. And then we went to ambiguous. And with the ambiguous, there are more negatives. But basically, it's the same situation. You just have more things to transform. If you go to a negative quality, I'm mean and I really don't like it, or something like that, then you have even more negatives and only a few positives. Well, it's still the same game. It's just that you start with many fewer positives. You might have to accumulate some from your memory to kind of give you a jump start on this thing, and then you start transforming the negatives. And sometimes you can transform a whole bunch at once, and sometimes you have to do them one at a time. So it's really, you already know how to do a negative thing. And in fact, an ambiguous quality is usually in a very different form than your positive. Fairly often, the negative's in the same form as the positive. It's just reversed. You have to check. You can't assume it. But more often, this is similar in the overall format than the ambiguous. The ambiguous is usually more different.
Could you say more about that in the same form?
Yeah. Well, let's say that the positive is like this. It's more often that the ambiguous will be in a very different form. There'll be a bunch of positives over here and a bunch of negatives over here, or something behind, or something like this. That it's very different than this, and it's more often that this will be in a very similar form, that it'll be also a grid. It's just that there's more negatives in the grid than positives. You can't count on it, but it's more often true. So you really already know how to do this one. We may spend some time tomorrow doing it, but you already know how to do it. Same game as here, except you have more negatives. And this is really the same game as here, except you have more negatives. And the form will be different, more often. Now and then, this could be in the same form in terms of the structure. Any other questions about what we've done today? Yes?
In the groups I've been in, I haven't had anyone who is primarily auditory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of a client I have who is so strongly auditory,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a lot of negativity in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what kind of time we have, if you could just maybe roll through an example of one of those.
Well, I gave you one example already, this man who had the 50 voices under there.
Yeah.
Some people have choruses screaming at them.
And one of the things you did is you said there are probably pictures to go with those.
Well, I don't care if there are pictures to go with them already. I can make them. I can transform them. Now, you can transform between all the rep systems, right? You can have a feeling and make a picture of that kind of motion, and then you can get a auditory description. Or if the activity actually made a sound, you could hear the sound of the activity. Like if you're running across the floor, you can hear the footsteps running across the floor. Or you can have a set of words that describes it, or both. So you can always translate between the different systems. And if someone has an auditory database, and then maybe they have some visual counterexamples, you could transform the images into a set of words. Just as if I was looking at a photograph and I'm describing it to you, I could translate from the visual into an auditory and then integrate auditory. You have to, if you're going to integrate, you need to have them in the same system. Otherwise, it just doesn't work very well. Yeah, in our culture, most people are very visual. In other cultures, many people are very auditory. Asian cultures require auditory because of the language is an auditory tonal language. And so here, many people who are auditory and auditory tonal have difficulty in school because our schools have a lot of visual. They have stuff on the blackboards and stuff all over the walls, and we slant things toward visual learning. And so in our culture, people who are auditory often have great difficulty. In Asian cultures, people who are not auditory are in big trouble. They can't even learn the language well. It really forces them to become auditory. If you have musical training, you become auditory, particularly if you have to tune your own instrument. All three of our boys play violin. If you play a piano, you can do it visually. You can go blink, you can see where the keys are, and you can read the music, and all you have to do is hit the right key in the right sequence. But when you're playing a violin, you have to continually adjust the finger on the strings to get exactly the right sound. It's very tricky. And just a tiny little movement of the finger will change the tone of the instrument a great deal. And so they've learned great auditory acuity because they get immediate feedback. If their finger's in the right place, they have to move it a little bit. Immediate feedback because they're bowing like this and they're trying to get a certain sound and it's a little different, then they have to adjust a little. I talked to a guy once who played guitar, and I forget the details, but from something he said, I knew that he was very visual and not very auditory. And so I asked him, who tunes your guitar for you? And he sort of looked startled like that. Because literally, he couldn't tune his own guitar. Once it was tuned, he could play a reasonably good tune because he could memorize where to put his finger on the frets. And there you just plunk down any old place between the frets and you get the right sound. It's not like a violin where you have a analog change there. So if you're with someone who's very auditory, you just adapt to that. And now, even if he's very auditory, he might have a visual database or kinesthetic. I don't know. English is also, people who are from England are also very tonal because it's so important to know one's status by the accent. And someone who's grown up in England can almost tell within 5 miles where someone grew up. And it's very important to know this. And there's certain, I was in training in Australia, and there's a woman there who's in a training organization, and she has the accent of the aristocracy. And I can't duplicate it. But when she gets on the phone, people jump because she has that aristocratic accent, and everybody knows she is a member of the aristocracy, and she gets what she wants on the phone. People do the special favors, and they make the special efforts and so on to get it done. Her husband does not have this accent, and when he gets on the phone, nobody pays any attention because he's lower class, This whole status thing. It's wonderful to read the headlines, the sports headlines in England, because in America it's Tigers smash Rams or kill. It's all this aggressive stuff, and in England it's Rams put Tigers in their place. Can you comment on that? You're nodding your head.
Yes and no. I think that I was just thinking about the aristocratic voice that you're talking about, or rather the Queen's English, which
Yes.
is rather like this.
Yes.
Bath and so on. I think there's a lot of presuppositions that go in with that, which assume that I will get my
Yes.
way,
Right.
which is an important part of it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, right now in the UK, you can really rub somebody's back up the wrong way with that because accents are very much more accepted now.
Mm-hmm.
Regional accents are more accepted.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resistance against that upper class.
Uh-huh.
So I
Okay.
suspect that now it's really more a matter of the presupposition
Mm.
than the accent.
Mm.
I'll tell
Well,
you when I go back.
coming from the United States, it's really apparent to me how much there is still that class thing, even though it's much less than it used to be. Yeah. Time for some. Let's get a quick comment and then we have some announcements.
On the Asian language, the Chinese one, because people are learning Chinese characters, and it takes 3,000 just to read the newspaper,
Yeah.
and 4,000 to do specialized work. And then they have to also have a visual strategy too.
Yes.
So they're quite flexible in all the things they need to learn, tonal and visual.
Yes.
So they they think nothing of to take the TOEFL test to apply to a university here in the States or abroad to memorize the whole dictionary visually.
Yeah.
Even though they can't speak, they know they have a huge vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah. Very visual, very auditory. Yeah. In English, it's more visual kinesthetic. Oh, well. Henry, come up and help me do some exercise, some announcements first. I forgot to introduce Kate. She's with us today and tomorrow. She was out not quite well yesterday, but she's here today and tomorrow. So she joins the group. And then Georgi, where is she? There. You're going to leave tomorrow, right? So we need to say goodbye to Georgi today, because she will be leaving tomorrow morning. And
before we do that, I have something which is called the final feedback sheet. So what we would like to ask you on this one is to give you feedback for the overall training.